Deep dive in the building. UK, what's really good? Let's dive in. Get triggered. Netflix, you son of an itch. In your show Adolescence, you pulled a race switch. The real killer teen is black, you made him white. This ish just ain't right.
We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved.
So have you been watching this show Adolescence on Netflix?
Oh, I have, yeah. Pretty intense, right?
It's been kind of dominating my conversations lately. Everyone's talking about it, and it is a hard watch for sure.
It is, yeah.
It centers on a 13-year-old who's accused of like a really horrific crime.
Yeah.
Murdering a classmate.
And then there's that inspired by true events tag.
Oh, I know. It makes it even more unsettling.
Oh, for sure. Like it just adds a whole other layer to it, you know?
Absolutely. And that's actually, I mean, that's exactly what we're diving into today, because when you start looking past the fictional story of adolescence, you find like some seriously disturbing parallels in real life cases that have happened right here in the UK.
Yeah.
Teenagers committing really shocking acts of violence. And we've gathered a bunch of articles for this deep dive that not only show this really dark reality, but they also highlight a really big debate that's popped up about how the show portrays the main character.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's really sparked a lot of conversation. So, for everyone listening today, what we're going to do is connect this super buzzed about show with the real life situations that seem to have inspired it. We'll also dig into the controversy surrounding some of the choices the show made, especially about the killer's race, like how they show him on screen.
Yeah.
And then, ultimately, we have to think about what this all means, like the bigger picture of how these kinds of tough stories are presented to us as entertainment.
Yeah, for sure.
So to kick things off, let's look at these real-life crimes. We've got this article here from Birmingham Live, and it really drives home how adolescence, disturbing as it is, mirrors some truly tragic events involving teenagers as the perpetrators.
Yeah, and what really hits you right away from the article is just how many of these really awful cases have happened just in the last little while. It makes you realize this isn't just some isolated, far-off thing.
Right, exactly. So the first case the article talks about is the murder of this 15-year-old girl, Eliane Andom. This happened back in September 2023. Can you give us some more detail on what happened in that case?
So tragically, Eliane was killed during the day right out in the open outside a shopping center in Croydon. She was a young woman who wanted to be a lawyer, only 15 years old, and she was stabbed to death by a 17-year-old kid named Hassan Sentamu. And the article says the motive was that Eliane had stepped in to defend a friend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the legal part of it's interesting too. So Sentamu ended up getting a life sentence with a minimum of 23 years. He had actually pleaded guilty to manslaughter, claiming what they called diminished responsibility, basically saying his mental state at the time meant he wasn't fully in control.
Right.
But the jury didn't buy it.
That's just devastating. And the article actually quotes Eliane's mother from her victim impact statement. She described her daughter as the kindest, most loving, and talked about how this senseless act just completely destroyed her life. I mean, you just can't even imagine.
No, absolutely not.
So then the article goes on to talk about Holly Newton.
Yeah. Holly was also just 15 when she was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, Logan McPhail, in January 2023. What's particularly chilling about this case is that Holly had actually told people she was worried about McPhail stalking her after they broke up. He was 16 at the time, and he actually followed Holly and her friends while wearing a disguise, and then he stabbed her 26 times. It's just awful. He ended up getting a minimum sentence of 17 years. But I mean, the level of planning and just the sheer brutality from someone that young, it's really disturbing.
That detail about the disguise, it's just chilling.
Yeah.
So the article then goes on to describe the murder of Brianna Gay, another case that really shocked a lot of people.
Yeah, this one really hit hard. Brianna was a transgender teenager who was targeted and murdered by these two other teenagers, Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe. They were both just 15 at the time. And what's really scary is that they actually planned the whole thing out. Yeah. The police later found a handwritten murder plan, and their motive, according to reports, was simply that they saw Brianna as an easy target. It's just heartbreaking. She was stabbed 28 times in a park. Jenkinson got a minimum sentence of 22 years, and Ratcliffe got a minimum of 20.
The fact that it was planned,
I know.
Bone-chilling. Then the Birmingham Live article goes on to talk about the death of Muhammad Assam Ali in Birmingham.
Right. This was in January of this year, 2024. Muhammad was 17 years old, and he was stabbed to death by these two 15-year-old boys.
Wow.
And while only one of them actually did the stabbing, the other one was egging him on, like encouraging him to do it.
Oh, geez.
One boy was convicted of murder and possession of a knife, and the other one got convicted of manslaughter and possession of a bladed article. So again, it just shows how young these kids are who are involved in such extreme violence.
And lastly, the article covers the case of Ronan Kanda. This
Yeah.
was a truly awful case of mistaken identity, right?
It really was. Ronan was only 16 when he was stabbed from behind in this totally senseless act of mistaken identity. The two teenagers responsible were Prabjit Vaid Hesse and Sukman Shergill. They'd bought the knife online, and Ronan's wounds were incredibly deep, like 20 centimeters and 17 centimeters deep, and they just left him there to die near his home in Wolverhampton. Both of them got sentenced to life in prison. And what's unusual is that because of how serious the crime was, the judge actually lifted the usual reporting restrictions and let their names be made public even though they were so young.
Wow.
It's just a terrible story.
It is a really grim and disturbing list, and as the Birmingham Live article points out, all of these real-life tragedies, they're eerily similar to the basic idea behind this Netflix show, Adolescence. But this connection, it's also sparked a huge controversy, which brings us to our next point.
Yeah, the controversy about how the killer's race is shown in the Netflix show. We have excerpts here from an article called Netflix Controversy, Racial Depiction of a Killer, and another one called Selective Outrage.pdf that really dig into this issue.
Okay, so the main fact here, if we go by the Birmingham Live article and the details of Eliane Andam's case, is that the person who committed the crime in at least one of these very similar situations, Sansantamu, was black. However, in the Netflix show Adolescence, the character accused of murder, Ethan Riley, is portrayed as white.
Right. And that difference is really at the heart of the whole debate. The author of Selective Outrage.pdf, they don't see this as just some small artistic choice. They argue it's a deliberate act of what they call selective storytelling, even a kind of deception to fit a certain narrative about race and crime.
And the article goes on to say that changing the race like this, it distorts reality in a way that would probably cause a huge uproar if it were the other way around. Like if a white criminal was depicted as black in a similar fictional story.
Yeah, that's a key point the author makes. They're highlighting what they see as a potential double standard in how these kinds of decisions about representation are seen in Hollywood and the entertainment industry as a whole. The article suggests that changing the race of characters who are usually white to make things more inclusive, that's often celebrated as a good thing. But a similar change going the other way, especially when it involves something as sensitive as violent crime, it often gets less attention or even gets justified.
The worry the article brings up is that seeing this kind of subtly changed reality over and over again in popular media, it can actually influence how people unconsciously think about crime and who they associate with it.
Right.
Like over time, it might warp people's understanding of the real demographics of crime.
Exactly. And the author of Selective Outrage.pdf, they're worried this can have even bigger effects on society, like impacting policy discussions and how we talk about criminal justice as a whole. They acknowledge that Netflix might try to explain these changes by saying they serve the story or that they're exploring more universal themes, but the article argues that a lot of viewers see it as rewriting the source material. Like, they know where the inspiration for the show came from, and they see the changes as deliberate.
And the article ends pretty strongly, saying that truth matters, and that letting entertainment companies twist facts to fit their own agendas, no matter what those agendas might be, sets a dangerous precedent.
Right.
It really makes it a question of media responsibility and the duty to reflect reality, especially when dealing with such serious and sensitive topics like violent crime and race.
It's a powerful argument for sure, and it definitely raises important questions about where we draw the line between creative freedom and ethics when something's presented as inspired by true stories, especially when those stories involve real tragedies and complicated social issues like race.
And it's really important for us to say, again, like we always do in our deep dives, that while these sources have strong opinions, our job here is to present the information and the arguments they make fairly. We're laying out the facts and the different perspectives without endorsing any particular viewpoint on this whole controversy.
Exactly. Our goal is to understand the content of these sources and help you, our listener, understand them too.
Right.
The views and conclusions are those of the authors who wrote the articles.
So to sum it all up, the Netflix show Adolescence, with its disturbing story of teen violence, it unfortunately reflects a very real and dark reality here in the UK, as we've seen from those tragic cases of teens committing brutal murders. However, the show has also become the center of a major controversy because they seem to have changed the race of the killer compared to at least one of the real-life cases that seem to have inspired the story.
And this has led to accusations of selective storytelling and a whole discussion about the potential consequences of these choices and how they portray things, especially when it comes to race and crime. The main point of contention seems to be this idea of a possible double standard in how the media represents things, and the broader question of whether it's okay to change reality to make a story work.
Which leads us to a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Given these real-life tragedies and the debate about how they're portrayed in fiction, how should the entertainment industry find a balance between creative freedom and the responsibility to show things as they really are, especially with incredibly sensitive topics like violent crime and race? And what does it truly mean when a show or movie is labeled as inspired by true events if key facts are left out or significantly changed?
Something to think about, that's for sure.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but hopefully this deep dive has given you some things to consider.
I think so, yeah. It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
It's such a tough issue.
Yeah,
Lots to unpack.
for sure. Well, thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, we'll catch you on the next one.
See you next time.
Deep dive in the building. UK, what really good? Let's dive in. Get triggered. Netflix, you son of an itch. In your show Adolescence, you pulled a race switch. The real killer teen is black, you made him white. This ish just ain't right. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground. For freedom, for tradition in this land we found. We cherish our Constitution, the words that set us free, the right to bear arms, to speak and to agree. We honor our forefathers who fought with steadfast might for the dream of a nation shining bright in the night. In every town and village, in every heart and home, we'll uphold our principles, together we'll roam. Through trials and through triumphs, we'll never lose our way. With conservative values leading us day by day, we're diving deep